The conference room reeked of polished leather and old money. Amara stood just inside the doorway, her hands folded, eyes steady, while conversations died out around her. A woman in pearls muttered, "Who let the maintenance girl in here?" Laughter. A man in a tailored suit didn't bother to whisper, "She's probably lost." 17, brown skin, natural curls, thrift store jacket. That's all it took for them to decide she didn't belong. No one offered her a seat. No one asked her name. She didn't flinch. Instead, she looked up straight into the security camera in the corner like she knew something they didn't. When the family's longtime attorney entered, the tension barely shifted until he stopped beside her and said, without hesitation, "Miss Amara, please, take your seat right here, next to me." And in that moment, the room forgot how to breathe. The walls were covered in framed accolades, decades of magazine covers, Harvard degrees, photos with presidents. The Langstons didn't just build wealth. They sculpted a legacy out of ego. Amara walked further in, her shoes quiet against the marble floor. Her mother's shoes used to squeak, always apologizing for making noise. Amara made none. At the far end of the room sat the Langston clan, polished, privileged, perfumed. Gregory Langston's eldest son, Brent, raised an eyebrow and leaned over to whisper something into his sister's ear. They chuckled, not discreetly. "Who invited housekeeping?" Someone muttered, "She's here for the post-funeral cleanup." The will's being read, not the carpets. Amara didn't flinch. Her eyes moved slowly across the room, taking in the veiled contempt, the forced smiles, the champagne glasses trembling ever so slightly. Power never did like surprises. Elaine Langston, Gregory's sister, adorned in ivory silk and dripping with old pearls, tilted her head with theatrical concern. "Sweetheart, this is a private family matter. Perhaps you're looking for the kitchen staff entrance." Amara met her gaze, calm, unapologetic. "I was invited." Elaine blinked, momentarily thrown off. Before scoffing and turning away, "Invited," she repeated, as if the word tasted strange in her mouth. Landon, the youngest grandson, lifted his phone under the table and snapped a photo. Within seconds, a post hit social media. Langston will reading, "Some girl just walked in like she owns the place." #lost and confused. The likes trickled in immediately. Aunt Patricia laughed, probably looking for leftovers. The room seemed to buzz with arrogance. Still, Amara stood still. She waited. A minute passed, then another, and then the double doors opened. Ennis Clark, the family's legal counsel for over 30 years, stepped in holding a sleek black briefcase. His presence had always carried weight, but today it landed like thunder. He nodded politely to each Langston in turn, his expression unreadable, but when his eyes met Amara's, he gave the smallest nod, the kind a man makes when he's acknowledging not just a person, but a moment that matters. "Miss Amara," he said, gesturing to the chair beside his desk, "right here." You could hear the oxygen leave the room. Brent coughed on his drink. Patricia's purse hit the floor. Elaine's eyes widened, then narrowed. "You know her?" she asked, voice now edged with alarm. "Of course," Clark replied evenly. "You should all know her too." He turned to face the family. Amara Bennett, daughter of Clarice Bennett. Clarice worked for the Langston family for over 20 years. The housemaid Brent nearly choked. Patricia spat. "She's here for the will." Amara finally stepped forward and took the seat. Posture straight, hands calm, eyes unblinking. She didn't look at them. She didn't need to. Let them sit in their own noise. Let them squirm in the silence she didn't break. Because they were about to learn what Gregory Langston had discovered only months before his death, that the girl they had ignored, dismissed, and mocked, had been watching, listening, learning, and now She was the reason they were all here. Ennis Clark placed the briefcase on the mahogany desk with deliberate care. Every click of the latch echoed in the room like a drumbeat. As per Mr. Langston's final instructions, he said, "We'll begin today's proceedings with a video message." Brent groaned, adjusting his cufflinks. Seriously, a farewell film. How dramatic can this get? Show the man some respect, Patricia muttered. Though her tone was far from sincere, the lights dimmed, a hidden screen descended from the wall, and then his face, Gregory Langston, gaunt, eyes sunken. But even through the veil of illness, there was steel in his gaze. "If you're watching this," the voice rasped, "then I'm gone, and I assume the room is full of tension, entitlement, and champagne." A nervous chuckle rippled across a corner of the room, then died. Gregory continued, "But before any numbers get read, I want to ask a question, just one." He paused. "Who here can tell me the full name of Clarice Bennett's daughter?" The silence that followed was the loudest thing that had ever filled the room. Elaine blinked. Brent shifted. Landon scratched his head. Amara didn't move. Gregory smiled sadly on screen. "Exactly what I thought. She worked for this family for 2 decades, cooked your food, mended your clothes, drove your children, died with nothing but bills in her purse and calluses on her hands. And not one of you ever asked the name of her daughter, though she stood in your house every Saturday. Folding napkins you'd spill wine on." Patricia's phone buzzed another notification. She reached for it, then paused. Suddenly, none of it felt worth sharing. Gregory's voice grew stronger. "I watched you. These past few years, I watched how you spoke to nurses, to drivers, to the delivery men. I watched the disdain, the performance of power, and I asked myself, is this who inherits what I built?" A long exhale from Gregory, his eyes once proud, now disappointed. And then there was hers. The camera cut to a still image of Amara, standing beside a bookshelf, holding a legal textbook in one hand, a notepad in the other, candid, unposed, radiant. She never asked me for anything, never assumed, never interrupted. She read the books no one touched, helped her mother quietly, cared for her with a kind of grace I saw in no one else. He looked straight at the camera, at them, at use. "You saw a maid's daughter. I saw a mind that asked better questions than any of you ever did." Brent stood suddenly, voice sharp. "This is manipulation, sentimental garbage." Amara didn't even blink. Ennis Clark didn't flinch. Gregory, recorded weeks earlier, smirked on screen. Brent's probably objecting by now. I expected that. Brent sat down slowly, his face pale. Gregory turned serious. "I had conversations with Amara these last months, long ones. She told me her dreams, not dreams of revenge, not of wealth, but of rebuilding, of equity." Another pause. "She didn't want what I offered. She said no, twice." The room gasped. "She said she didn't want to be used as a symbol, that she didn't believe justice came from switching hands on the sword, but from melting it down." Elaine looked queasy. Gregory leaned in, as if to speak to each of them privately. "That's why she's the only one in this room who deserves to be here." The screen faded to black. No one spoke. Then the lights returned. Clark reached into the briefcase and produced a sealed envelope. "I have been authorized to read the principal clauses of Mr. Langston's final testament," he said. "There is a second video that will be played if, and only if, the provisions of the will are contested." Elaine's voice cracked first. "You mean to tell me she—" "Yes?" Clark interrupted gently. "You'll want to hear this." He opened the envelope and read aloud. "I, Gregory Thorne Langston, being of sound mind and will, do hereby leave 51% of my holdings in Langston & Co., including all voting rights, to Ms. Amara Bennett." Gasps. A hand clutched pearls. Brent cursed under his breath. "In addition," Clark continued, "I leave the primary Manhattan residence, the Catskills estate, and liquid assets totaling $25 million to Miss Bennett, to be held in trust until her 21st birthday. Interim management will be overseen by a board appointed by myself and co-chaired by Dr. Renee Whitmore. Dr. Whitmore. Patricia snapped. That woman who runs the community clinic. The doors opened. A poised, middle-aged black woman stepped inside, clipboard in hand, calm and commanding. She was also Gregory's oncologist, Clark clarified, and one of the few people he trusted to tell him the truth. Doctor, Whitmore nodded once to Amara. Amara returned it barely, but her eyes said everything. Landon muttered, "This isn't real." But it was, every second of it, and no one in the room, not even Amara, could stop what was about to unfold. The room exploded. Brent shot up from his chair so fast it toppled backward. "This is a fraud," he bellowed. Face flushed. Veins taut along his neck. He was clearly manipulated. He was dying. Elaine's voice trembled with fury. "This is not legal. She's a child. A janitor's child. She's not even family." Patricia hissed. But her words lacked conviction now. Her fingers fumbled at her phone, as if a single tweet might undo what had just happened. Landon muttered, 51%, she controls the board. No one noticed that Amara hadn't moved since Clark began reading. She sat still, her hands resting gently on her lap, her breath steady, like she'd practiced this moment in silence 1,000 times. She manipulated a sick old man. Brent roared again. "This will be overturned. We'll sue." Clark held up one hand calmly. "If I may remind the room, Mr. Langston anticipated such a reaction. That is why he prepared a secondary statement." He inserted a flash drive into the console. The screen flickered again. Gregory Langston appeared once more, this time thinner, breathing harder but somehow even more focused. "If you're seeing this," he said, "then I was right. I knew my family well enough to predict you wouldn't accept this easily. Let me be clear," he continued. "I was of sound mind. I made these decisions after months of deliberation, legal counsel, and quiet observation." He leaned forward. "And no, Amara didn't ask for a dime. In fact, she refused it twice. I had to convince her this was more than inheritance. It was restoration." Patricia whispered, "No one will believe this." But Gregory anticipated that too. Over the last 6 months, he said, "I documented everything. Conversations, phone calls, behavior. You see, I realized something. Truth doesn't need to be defended. It only needs to be shown." The screen changed. Clips began playing. Brent screaming at a valet who scratched his car, Elaine firing a nurse who wore a headscarf, Patricia at a dinner party, making a joke about those people in the Bronx, Landon calling an intern urban trash. Each moment, captured, dated, undeniable. Gregory's voice returned. "I didn't build this company so it could be inherited by arrogance. I built it to last, and people like Amara. They're why it still can." The screen went black again. Silence fell, but not the kind that follows a funeral, the kind that follows an earthquake. Brent looked around. "This can't be the end of it. We can challenge it." Clark nodded. "You may, but you will lose." He opened a second file from the briefcase. Gregory Langston took legal steps to protect this transition, including private video testimony, medical certification of mental fitness, and court-reviewed trusteeship structures. Elaine's lip curled. "She's 17. She can't run a corporation." "I'm not running anything," Amara said quietly. All heads turned. "I don't want the boardroom. I want the vision." Clark smiled faintly, then added, "Ms. Bennett has appointed interim leadership per Mr. Langston's provisions, including Dr. Whitmore, and 5 new board members, all individuals with long histories at Langston & Co." previously overlooked or unjustly terminated. The doors opened again. 5 people walked in, none of them in suits. One wore a mechanic's jacket, one a schoolteacher's cardigan, one was a former warehouse manager. All of them had been dismissed under previous leadership. Elaine scoffed. "This is a circus." "No," said the man in the mechanic's jacket. "It's a mirror." He stepped forward. Name's Terrence Mayfield, 20 years in logistics. Fired when I tried to propose a profit-sharing model. Amara stood now, calm, poised. "You built a tower on the backs of people like him," she said, "and when we asked for a seat at the table, you gave us the basement, us. Now," she continued, "we're flipping the table." Brent's eyes were wild. "You'll crash this company." "No," said Dr. Whitmore. "We'll rebuild it." Clark cleared his throat. "All documents have been signed. The transfer is complete. The board has been notified. Financial disclosures will go out today." Patricia's voice cracked. "You're ruining everything." Amara turned to face her. "I'm not ruining anything. I'm revealing it. You never built a legacy. You inherited one, and you mistook inheritance for merit." She looked to each face in the room. "I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to change what punishment has never fixed." A long silence. Then Brent, desperate, asked, "What do you want from us?" Amara looked at him not with anger, but with something deeper. "Clarity. I want you to learn what it feels like to be powerless," she said, "to be judged before you speak, to walk into a room and be seen as nothing. Because that's where change begins." And with that, the foundations of the Langston Empire shifted not with an explosion, but with the quiet decision of a girl they never saw coming. Later that afternoon, the Langston family remained behind closed doors, stunned, paralyzed, but outside, the world had already begun to change. The first press release dropped at 300 p.m. Langston & Co. appoints new community-led board. CEO, title vacant. But the real shock came in the second release this time, delivered live by Amara Bennett herself. Standing on the front steps of Langston Tower before a swarm of cameras and microphones, "I know the question everyone's asking," she began. "Why me?" She didn't wear a suit. She wore her mother's blue blouse, ironed flat, and black slacks. She didn't look like a CEO. She looked like someone you'd pass on the street, and that was the point. "I'm not here to explain why Gregory Langston chose me. That's already been said. I'm here to tell you what I intend to do." She held up a folder. "These," she said, "are deeds, over 70 land titles, neighborhoods, buildings, abandoned blocks, property quietly acquired by Langston subsidiaries over decades, often through evictions, redlining, or predatory buying." The crowd hushed. "These titles are being returned to the people who live there, effective today." Reporters gasped. Questions flew. One journalist called out, "You're giving away company assets." Amara looked directly at the camera. "They were never ours to begin with." She continued, "For too long, wealth in this country has been built on displacement, on silence, on legal theft, the kind that no one calls out because the paperwork was clean. Gregory Langston saw this, he admitted it, and he left me the power to undo it." A montage of news outlets followed within the hour. Langston Empire heir. Begins land restitution. Teen CEO reverses generational injustices. Wall Street divided over moral reforms at Langston & Co.'s. But that was only half of it. By evening, the glass doors of Langston Tower opened again. This time, for the workers. Amara had sent out personal invitations, hundreds of them, to former employees who had been laid off, fired, or forced out over the last 10 years. Warehouse staff, receptionists, line managers, drivers, janitors, and they came hesitant, skeptical, wary. Inside the lobby, posters lined the walls. Your seat is waiting, and you were never invisible to us. Terence Mayfield, the logistics worker turned board member, greeted each of them with a handshake and a smile. You're not applicants, he told them. You're witnesses. You know this company better than anyone. Dr. Whitmore stepped forward to explain. We're building a new department, Employee Equity and Historical Accountability. You'll help guide policy, compensation, and reform. One by one, the workers sat down for interviews not to be judged, but to be heard. Amara joined them midway through, pulling up a chair, listening to every story. When a former cafeteria worker wept, recalling how she was fired for taking time off to bury her son, Amara placed her hand over hers. I'm sorry, she said. No policy justifies that. By nightfall, 6-7, former employees had been reinstated. 42 more were offered advisory roles, and Amara made a final announcement. The first vote I cast as majority shareholder was to approve a reparations fund. Every employee unjustly dismissed or underpaid by Langston & Co. will be eligible for retroactive compensation. No NDAs, no silence clauses, just dignity. Inside the executive boardroom, still occupied by the Langston family, Brent exploded. She's torching the company, giving away land, paying ex-workers like victims, Elaine whispered. How is this legal? Patricia stared blankly out the window. Because it's already done. Clark entered just then, calm as ever. You were never expected to understand, he said. You were only expected to watch. You see, he added, this isn't just about money anymore. It's about narrative, and that's something Amara now owns. Back downstairs, a surprise guest arrived. Her name was Diane Vargas, former VP of Human Resources, fired 8 years ago for pushing back against discriminatory hiring practices. She approached Amara, holding a weathered folder. I kept records, she said quietly. Emails, memos, warnings I sent to your uncle, everything they tried to bury. Amara opened the folder, eyes scanning the contents. This helps more than you know, she said. Diane hesitated, then asked, why bring us back? Why trust people the system discarded? Amara didn't blink. Because you saw what was wrong while you were inside, that means you know where the cracks are. And I'm not interested in patching cracks. I'm interested in tearing down walls. The next morning, local newspapers ran with the quote, I'm not patching cracks, I'm tearing down walls. Amara Bennett. At City Hall, tenants from a long-disputed building received news they now owned the property, free and clear, deed signed, transfer registered. An elderly man with calloused hands fell to his knees, holding the paper. I was born here, he whispered. They told me I'd die in debt. Elsewhere, the former janitor from Langston Tower was now head of facility strategy. His first act, install motion sensor lights in every break room and repaint employee spaces in warm colors. This place should feel like it respects you, he said. Reporters started calling it the Langston Flip, where the hierarchy reversed. Not out of vengeance, but out of justice. One headline nailed it. From the basement to the boardroom. Amara's quiet revolution. And at the center of it all, a teenager with no interest in being worshipped. She just wanted things put right. They didn't show up for the press. They didn't post on social media. They didn't even leave the building that night. Instead, the remaining Langston heirs sat in silence in the upper floor conference room once reserved for high-level deals, now repurposed as a temporary transition space. No more champagne. No more assistants waiting outside the door. Just the heavy weight of consequences hanging in the air. Patricia was the first to speak. So what now? She whispered. Brent ran a hand through his hair. We sue. We hire crisis PR. We reclaim the narrative. Elaine looked down at her lap. Gregory planned for that. He left receipts, videos. Every sin we thought was private archived, timed, unshakable. The door opened. Ennis Clark stepped inside. No briefcase this time, just a folder. "You have two paths ahead of you," he said without ceremony. "You can contest the will, but you'll lose." Or, he laid the folder down gently. "You can participate in what Mr. Langston called the Mirror Initiative." Brent scowled. "Mirror. What is this?" "Therapy." Clark didn't blink. "It's a year-long social immersion program, volunteer work in underserved communities, inclusion training, living without staff, without private accounts, without priority access." Elaine scoffed. "You want us to pretend to be poor?" "No," Clark replied. "You're not pretending. You're confronting. The difference is critical." He handed each of them a booklet. Langston, Restorative Education Program. Year 1 Protocol. Tagline: "You can't change a world you refuse to see." Con. Inside were schedules, rotations in food banks, affordable housing construction, juvenile mentorship. Each of you will work with communities directly impacted by Langston acquisitions. You'll listen, observe, serve, document. Patricia stared at the page showing her assigned nonprofit, a re-entry center for formerly incarcerated women. Her voice trembled. "Is this punishment?" Amara's voice came from behind them. "No." They turned. She stood in the doorway, not triumphant, but present. "It's an opportunity," she said. "You can't erase what's been done, but you can finally understand what you were part of." Brent stood. "You want us to disappear?" Amara shook her head. "No, I want you to deconstruct us." Elaine's voice softened. "Unsure. And if we refuse, then the documents go public." Clark replied, "Not as threats, but as history. Let the world decide." There was a long pause. Then Patricia asked, very quietly, "And what happens if we say yes?" Amara stepped closer. "You won't get applause or forgiveness. You'll work. You'll be uncomfortable, and no one will say thank you." She placed her hand gently on the table. "But maybe somewhere in that, something inside you will shift. And that might be enough." 3 weeks later, Patricia was spotted in a church basement, organizing supplies for a shelter. Her manicured hands now wore calluses. The viral video of her past remarks still lingered online, but so did new footage her apologizing publicly. Not with spin, but with stillness. Elaine moved into a subsidized apartment complex as part of the empathy training module. Her neighbors didn't recognize her. They knew her only as the quiet woman who baked cornbread and stayed up reading. Brent resisted the longest. He showed up late, questioned every assignment, complained constantly, until one day, while helping renovate a neglected community library, a child handed him a picture he drew of the volunteers. Brent asked, "Who's this one?" "You." The boy said, "You look tired, but kind." Brent didn't speak for the rest of the afternoon. No cameras were there. No Instagram captions, just silence. And maybe for the first time in his life, self-awareness. Back at Langston Tower, Amara watched the transition quietly. She didn't gloat. She didn't call it justice. She called it alignment. The point isn't to shame them. She told Dr. Whitmore, it's to offer them the rarest kind of wealth clarity. "And what if they don't take it?" the doctor asked. Amara looked out the window. "Then they stay rich in numbers, but bankrupt in meanings." 6 months passed. The Langston & Co. building still scraped the sky, but everything beneath its gleaming glass facade had changed. Gone were the marble busts of Gregory Langston and other patriarchs that once loomed over the lobby. In their place stood a living wall, green vines, bright flowers, and a plaque that simply read, "Legacy is not what you leave behind, it's what you set free." On the ground floor, what was once a private executive lounge had been transformed into a community entrepreneurship hub. Teenagers from underserved boroughs now attended free after-school classes in financial literacy, civic leadership, and startup pitching. Amara walked through the space one morning, greeting each student by name. Chris, how's the mentorship project going? Ria, your business pitch slides looked tight yesterday. She wore no name tag. She didn't need one. To them, she wasn't a CEO. She was real. Upstairs, Terrence Mayfield, now Director of Operations, gave his morning report. Quarterly profits are up 12%, attrition's down 40%, productivity's peaking. Employees cite transparency and equity as the top reasons they stayed, as Dr. T. Whitmore added, and the Employee Council has voted unanimously to expand mental health services and implement 4-day weeks in high-stress departments, sir. Amara nodded, approved. Carlos, once a janitor, now facilities head, entered with a stack of feedback forms. Also, the break rooms now have adjustable lighting and multilingual signage. Tiny things, but it matters. Amara smiled. It always does. On another screen, a local news report played in the background. The Langston flip continues to shake up Wall Street. Once criticized as reckless, the new leadership has not only restored investor confidence, but redefined corporate responsibility standards nationwide. But not everyone was there to celebrate. Downstairs, outside the building, Brent Langston leaned against a lamppost, his hair longer, his suit traded for a hoodie and jeans, a duffel bag hung from his shoulder. He watched from a distance as people flowed in and out of the tower. Normal people, diverse, engaged, empowered. His phone buzzed. Langston Re-Entry Program, Intern Placement, Orientation. 10:00 a.m. He hesitated, then entered. Upstairs, Patricia was already in session, working alongside 2 formerly unhoused women on a media campaign for equity in digital access. She didn't ask for coffee. She fetched it, and she listened more than she spoke. At noon, Amara stepped onto the rooftop garden, a new installation overlooking the city skyline. Her mother, Clarice, sat in the sunlight, a scarf wrapped gently around her healing scalp, cancer in remission, eyes full of peace. "This wasn't just your fight," she told Amara, "but you carried it like it was." Amara knelt beside her. "I carried it," she said, "because you carried me." Clarice touched her daughter's hand, and now Amara looked out over the city. "Now I pass it on." Inside the tower, a new inscription had been carved into the stone entrance. Not a quote from Gregory, not a company slogan, but a promise. Power isn't kept, it's shared. 1 year to the day after Gregory Langston's will reshaped an empire. The company auditorium overflowed. The occasion, the opening of the Langston Institute for Economic Equity, a non-profit arm dedicated to education, land reform, and reparative economic policy. But the real reason people came wasn't the ribbon cutting. It was her. Amara stood at the podium. No notes in hand, just her voice and the silence that followed. "You've all heard the story," she began. "The girl who got the fortune, the family that lost it." Some in the crowd chuckled, but her face remained still. "That's not the real story," she said. "The real story is about a system that taught power was something hoarded, protected, guarded by gates and legacy surnames. And what happens when someone decides to rewrite that rule?" She paused. "In the early days, people asked me why I didn't punish the Langstons, why I didn't sell everything, shut it down, walk away." She looked out over the sea of faces, young, old, black, brown, white, immigrants, former employees, ex-heirs now interns. I didn't want to destroy the system, she said. I wanted to reveal it. Gasps, nods, to show how it was built, who it left behind, and what it could look like if it were rebuilt from the ground up with justice, not dominance. Behind her, screens lit up with images of what had changed. Families receiving titles to land once quietly stolen, formerly incarcerated mothers now leading microfinance programs, teenagers pitching their business ideas inside a tower that once excluded them. We don't need more rulers, Amara said. We need architects. And then, quietly, I didn't inherit an empire. I inherited a chance to pass the mic, to break the chain. In the front row, Clarice wiped a tear. Patricia sat beside her, no longer adorned in gold, but in humility. She had completed the Mirror Initiative, and though the internet hadn't forgotten her past, she had begun writing a different one. Brent stood in the back, a clipboard in hand, taking attendance, no longer in exile, but in practice. And far in the corner, a child looked up at Amara with wide eyes. Their hand clasped a notebook that read, "One day, I'll build a company too." Amara stepped down from the stage, not into applause, but into purpose. Because revolutions don't always start with riots. Sometimes they begin when someone who was never meant to have power chooses to share it.